The icy Vancouver wind cut like invisible blades through Marcus Chen's torn coat. Sitting on the sidewalk of Granville Street, he watched the hurried passers-by avoid his gaze with the precision of someone who had practiced this social dance for years. His paper cup was nearly empty. Only a few coins clinked at the bottom as someone rushed past. It was December 15th, 10 days before Christmas, and the city shone with festive lights that seemed to mock its plight. Marcus was 42 years old, but his face, etched with age and nights spent outdoors, easily added a decade to his appearance. His hands trembled, not only from the sub-5-degree cold, but from the withdrawal that gnawed at his insides like a starving animal. "Sorry, no change," murmured a woman in an expensive suit, quickening her pace as she spoke on the phone about restaurant reservations for the company party. Marcus nodded mechanically. He had become invisible, a human shadow that people preferred to ignore. But it hadn't always been this way. 8 years ago, Marcus Chen was a respected name in Vancouver's tech industry. A computer science graduate from the University of British Columbia, he had co-founded a cybersecurity startup that reached a valuation of $3 million. Then his wife Sarah died in a car accident. The pain was so overwhelming that Marcus found solace first in alcohol, then in prescription painkillers, and finally in substances that promised to make the agony disappear completely. In 18 months, he lost his company, his house, his friends. In 3 years, he was on the streets. "Hey, you!" The gruff voice snapped Marcus out of his thoughts. A mall security guard was pointing at him. "I already warned you about staying here. Get out of here or I'll call the police." Marcus picked up his worn blanket and his bag of belongings. He knew the routine. He walked 3 blocks until he found another spot, an alleyway entrance near a 7-Eleven convenience store. The smell of curry and hot coffee wafted through the door, making his stomach rumble. He hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. She sat down and closed her eyes, trying to remember the last time she felt real warmth. That's when Sarah's memory surfaced. Not the painful one from the accident, but a good one. They were dancing in the kitchen of their first apartment, laughing while they burned dinner. "You're terrible in the kitchen, but perfect at everything else," she had said. A tear froze on her face. Before falling, the sound of quick footsteps alerted him. Marcus opened his eyes and saw a man in a suit running toward him, frantically looking at his cell phone. The man was younger, probably in his 30s, with perfectly combed hair and a watch that likely cost more than Marcus had earned in 6 months of begging. "Shit, shit, shit." The man typed furiously into the phone, clearly panicked. Then it happened in slow motion. The man tripped on a patch of ice. The phone flew from his hands, slid across the frozen ground, and landed right at Marcus's feet. The device, a brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max, was flashing with dozens of notifications. The man fell to his knees a few meters ahead, his tailored trousers tearing on the rough concrete. Marcus picked up his phone and, for a brief second, looked at the screen. Messages reading, "Urgent, where are you?" and "The deal is falling apart," flashed frantically. I could just keep the device. It would be worth at least $1,000 on the black market. That would cover weeks of food, maybe a cheap room, some clean clothes, but something in the expression of utter despair on the man's face, something Marcus recognized from his own reflections in shop windows, made him hesitate. "Here," Marcus said, extending the phone. The man stood up quickly, grabbed the device, and began typing without even looking at Marcus. "Yes, I still have the documents. I'm on my way. No, wait." He spoke in English with a slight British accent. Marcus started to turn around, but the man's hand landed on his shoulder. "Wait!" The man finally looked him in the eyes, really looked him. You could have kept it." Marcus shrugged. "It's not mine." "What's your name?" "Marcus." The man extended his hand. "James Wellington." And he paused, looking Marcus up and down, processing something. "I have an absolutely insane proposition for you." And what James was about to propose would change not only Marcus's next 24 hours, but his entire understanding of what truly matters in life. James didn't immediately let go of Marcus's hand. His green eyes analyzed the man in front of him with an almost scientific intensity, as if he were calculating probabilities, measuring risks, weighing invisible variables. "Do you read?" James asked abruptly. Marcus blinked, confused. "What? Books? Newspapers? Do you read?" "I used to read a lot." Marcus frowned. "Why?" James looked at his phone again, where a digital countdown showed 23:47, 12. "Because in less than 24 hours, I need to close the biggest deal of my career, and my personal assistant has just been admitted to the hospital with acute appendicitis." Marcus took a step back. "Look, I don't know what you think $3,000, James interrupted. 3,000 Canadian dollars in cash if you help me for the next 24 hours. The number hit Marcus like a punch. $3,000. He hadn't seen that kind of money in years. What exactly was I supposed to do with it? Be my eyes and ears, take notes, carry documents. Basically, don't let me forget anything critical while I deal with investors, lawyers, and a group of corporate executives who would love to see me fail." James checked his watch again. "My business is literally falling apart because I lost my right-hand man. I need someone now. Why me? Why not call a temporary employment agency?" James let out a humorless laugh. "Because I don't have time for hiring processes, background checks, and training, and because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because someone who returns an iPhone when they're clearly desperate is exactly the kind of person who isn't going to stab me in the back in the next 24 hours. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a spark of something akin to hope, mixed with deep skepticism. "You know where I was sitting 2 minutes ago, right? You know what I am? I know what you were like too," James said calmly, pointing to Marcus's hands. "These aren't the hands of someone who's always lived on the streets. They have scars from chemical burns, from a lab or electronics. You have the posture of someone who's spent years in an office. And when you spoke, I detected polite vocabulary beneath the hesitation." Marcus swallowed hard. It was unsettling to be seen, really seen, after being invisible for so long. "So?" James extended his hand again. 24 hours, $3,000. First thing, you take a shower and put on clean clothes. I have a meeting in an hour and 20 minutes. Marcus looked at the outstretched hand, then at the dark alley where he would spend another freezing night. The voices of doubt screamed in his mind. He would fail, disappoint this stranger, prove that he was exactly the failure he believed himself to be. But another voice, weaker, almost forgotten, whispered, "What if you're not that person anymore?" Marcus shook James's hand. He had no idea that this decision would bring him face to face with the demons that had haunted him for 8 years, and with a truth about himself that would change everything. James's apartment in downtown Vancouver was everything Marcus had imagined it would be. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the bay, minimalist Scandinavian furniture, and technology embedded in every surface. Marcus felt dirty just being there, leaving trails of melted snow on the polished wood floors. The showers over here, towels in the closet, clothes. "Well, you're bigger than me, but I'll improvise." James was already back on the phone, speaking rapidly. "No, tell Meredith that the Q4 numbers are non-negotiable." "Yes, I know what they offered. Because we're not desperate enough to..." Marcus closed the bathroom door, cutting off the conversation. The hot water was almost painful on his cold skin. He watched weeks, or was it months, of grime go down the drain. When he closed his eyes, the memories came flooding back as they always did. Sarah, laughing Sarah, driving Sarah, the horrible sound of twisting metal. He opened his eyes abruptly. "Not now, you can have it for 24 hours. When he went outside, he found clothes folded on the counter, navy blue chinos, a white button-down shirt, a grey cashmere sweater. Everything was a little tight, but it would fit. For the first time in years, Marcus saw his full reflection in a mirror. The man staring back was a stranger, too thin, with sunken eyes and visible scars of trauma on every line of his face. But dressed, shaved, clean, there was a glimmer of who he used to be. "Better," James said when Marcus emerged. He tossed him an iPhone. Not the expensive one Marcus had returned, but an older model. "Temporary. I set it up with what you need. Documents are in the app. Calendar is synced with mine. Its only function is to remind me of what's coming next and to jot down key points during meetings." Marcus gripped the phone like it was a grenade. "James, I need to tell you something." "You're an addict, I know." Marcus froze. How? The shivering, the sweating even at room temperature, the way your eyes automatically searched for the medicine cabinet when you walked into the bathroom. James didn't sound judgmental, just factual. "How long have I been clean?" 4 days. The admission hurt. "I try. Every week I try, and in the next 24 hours, you're going to want to use it. It's going to hurt. It's going to be absolutely miserable." James grabbed his coat. "But you have $3,000 and a purpose waiting on the other side. So the question is, can you endure it?" Marcus thought about all the times he promised himself he would stop. All the mornings waking up in gutters, swearing it would be different. All the disappointed faces, all the failures. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Good. Honesty works." James opened the door. "First meeting is with Richard Zhao, the lead investor. He's a shark. If he senses weakness, he'll devour us alive. So you need to appear confident, even if it's fake." They stepped into the elevator, and Marcus saw Vancouver stretching out below them, a city that had swallowed him whole, chewed him up and spat him out. And now, wearing borrowed clothes and clinging to a temporary purpose, he was about to enter a world that had long since expelled him. Richard Zhao's office occupied the 42nd floor of a glass skyscraper in the financial district. Marcus followed James like a shadow, clutching a leather briefcase, containing documents he barely understood. Financial projections, investment agreements, terms and conditions written in dense legal language. "Remember," James whispered in the elevator, "you don't need to speak. Just observe. Write down anything that seems important. And if I touch my nose like this," he demonstrated a discreet touch, "it means I need the quarterly evaluation numbers." Marcus nodded, his mouth dry. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright. His body screamed for relief. Any kind. A relief, but he clenched his fists and focused on the pain. Just 24 hours. You can do anything in 24 hours. The receptionist, a stern-looking woman with designer glasses, barely glanced at them. "Mr. Wellington, Mr. Zhao is with other investors. There will be 5 people at the meeting." James hesitated for only a fraction of a second, but Marcus noticed. This was unexpected. "Perfect," James said softly, regaining his composure. "The more, the merrier." But when they entered the conference room, Marcus understood the problem immediately. Seated around the mahogany table were not only investors, there was also a woman he recognized from the news. Catherine Lee, CEO of Vantech Capital, known for destroying startups and rebuilding them according to her vision. "James," Richard Zhao stood up, a man in his 60s with impeccably grey hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Did you bring a new associate?" "Marcus Chen, my personal assistant," James said without hesitation. "Marcus, this is Richard Zhao, Catherine Lee, and David Kowalski and Sarah Brighton," Catherine finished, her sharp gaze assessing Marcus from head to toe. "Representing the other 2 main investors in your Series B." Marcus sat down and opened the laptop James had given him in the car. His hands trembled slightly, but he forced them to stay steady. He began typing notes, concentrating intensely on the task as a way to avoid thinking about the growing tingling under his skin. "Let's get straight to the point," Catherine said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Your quantum cryptography technology is impressive, James, but your growth projections are optimistic. They are based on contracts that are already guaranteed," James began. "Contracts that depend on you delivering a functional product in 6 months," David interrupted. He was younger, probably in his 40s, with the nervous energy of someone who had drunk too much coffee. "And our analysts indicate that your current schedule is 3 months behind." Marcus typed each word, but part of his mind observed the body language. Catherine leaned back, confident, in control. Richard drummed his fingers lightly, impatient but still undecided. Sarah Brighton hadn't said anything, only observed with hawk-like eyes. "We have solutions for the technical delays," James said, his voice calm, but Marcus noticed a tension in his jaw. "If you look at page 12, Page 12 discusses reallocating resources from the QA department," Catherine interrupted. "Basically, you're proposing cutting quality testing to speed up the release. That's not solving the problem, James. It's creating future problems." That's when Marcus noticed something. He looked at the documents in the folder in front of him, and then at the numbers on the laptop screen. Something didn't add up. The dates, the serial numbers of the contracts James mentioned, didn't match those listed in the folder Catherine brought. He quickly wrote, on a day, post-it note, "Their documents are outdated, data from September, not November," and discreetly swiped it to James. James read without looking down, then a slow smile spread across his face. "With all due respect, Catherine, you're working with data from 2 months ago. David, the folder in front of you, check the serial number in the bottom right corner. It's BS09-2024, correct?" David frowned and checked. "Yes. You haven't received our last progress report. Those delays have been resolved. Marcus, can you project the updated timeline?" Marcus connected the laptop to the room's projector, his hands still trembling but functional. The presentation appeared, and it showed a completely different picture. The silence in the room had changed in quality, and it was at that moment that Marcus realized he wasn't just watching this deal happen. He was becoming an essential part of it. The meeting lasted another 3 hours. Catherine Lee became progressively less hostile as James presented. Evidence of confirmed contracts, corrected timelines, and strategic partnerships that were not included in the old documents the investors had. Marcus frantically took notes, his brain reactivating circuits that had been dormant for years. He began to see patterns in the numbers, identifying inconsistencies even before James pointed them out. When Catherine inquired about operational costs in Q2, Marcus already had the relevant spreadsheet open. "Your assistant is efficient," Richard Zhao commented, watching Marcus work. "How long has he been with you, James?" "Recently," James replied without hesitation, "but genuine talent is easy to recognize." When they finally left the building, the winter sun was beginning to set, only 4:30 p.m. But Vancouver in December got dark early. Marcus realized he hadn't thought about wearing anything in the last 3 hours. The adrenaline of the meeting, the intense focus, had pushed desires to the back burner. "You were exceptional in there," James said as they walked down Pender Street. The cold air bit, but Marcus now had a proper coat, especially when you noticed the discrepancy in the documents. That saved the meeting. "I used to do data analysis," Marcus heard himself say, "for my own company, before losing everything," James finished, not cruelly, but acknowledging the fact. He stopped in front of a Thai restaurant. "Have you eaten today?" Marcus couldn't remember the last proper meal he'd had. His stomach answered for him with a loud rumble. Inside the restaurant, while they waited for their food, James placed his phone on the table. "We have 7 meetings in the next 18 hours. 3 are with potential corporate clients. 2 with lawyers finalizing contracts, 1 with my technical team, and the last one, he paused. The last one is with a group of investors from London who are flying in specifically to learn about the operation. This seems important. It's the most important one. If I close this deal, I secure funding for the next 3 years. If I fail, the company survives, but I'm stuck in survival mode instead of growth mode. James took a sip of water. So yeah, a lot of pressure. The food arrived. Steaming pad thai, aromatic green curry, jasmine rice. Marcus picked up the silverware and realized his hands had finally stopped trembling. He began to eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the first meal of his life. "May I ask what happened?" James said calmly. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but you clearly weren't born to live on the streets." Marcus put his fork down on the table. For years, he had avoided telling his story. It was too painful, too shameful. But something in James's frankness, in the absence of judgment in his eyes, opened a floodgate. "My wife died. Sarah. Car accident 8 years ago." The words came out more easily than he expected. "I was driving. A truck lost control on Highway 1, hit our side. She died instantly. I got away with some cuts." James didn't say, "I'm sorry," for which Marcus was grateful. Platitudes didn't help. "I had a cybersecurity company, 3 million in valuation, but after Sarah died, I fell apart. I started drinking to sleep, then painkillers for the emotional pain, then stronger things because nothing else worked." Marcus looked at his hands. "I lost the company in 18 months. The partners kicked me out when they started finding bottles hidden in the office. I lost our apartment 6 months later. Friends stopped answering my calls. Family? My parents are from Hong Kong. When I told them about my addiction, in their culture, that's an unspeakable shame. They disowned me." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "So yes, it was a spectacular fall from grace." The silence stretched for a moment. Then James spoke, his voice restrained. "My younger brother died of an overdose 3 years ago. Harry. He was 24. James looked out the window at the busy street. "I was so focused on building my career that I didn't notice when he started using. Or maybe I did notice and pretended it wasn't my problem. When I finally paid attention, it was too late." Marcus sensed a shift in the air between them, a tacit understanding. "That's why you gave me a chance," Marcus said calmly. "It wasn't about needing an assistant. I needed an assistant," James corrected. "But also, yes. When you returned that phone, I saw something I wished I'd seen in Harry. Resilience, decency, a spark of something the streets couldn't completely extinguish." James's phone vibrated, a series of urgent notifications. He checked them, and his expression darkened. "Problem, big problem." He showed Marcus the screen. "Catherine Lee just told the other investors that my personal assistant had to be hospitalized. She's suggesting that the operation is unstable, that I can't manage personal and professional crises simultaneously." Marcus felt a pang of panic. "She's going to find out. You hired a homeless person as a temporary replacement. Not if she doesn't ask, but if someone starts asking questions." James rubbed his face. "That could destroy not only this deal, but my entire credibility." Marcus should have felt guilty. He was the risk, the vulnerability in James's operation, but instead he felt something different. Determination, anger even, at being underestimated, at being seen as disposable. "Then let's make sure they have nothing left to discover," Marcus said, his voice firmer than he felt. "You said I was exceptional at that meeting. I'll be even better at the next 7. James studied him for a long moment, then nodded. But neither of them had any idea that the next meeting would not only test Marcus's abilities, it would test every last shred of strength he had to avoid relapsing into the addictions that nearly killed him. The next meeting was in a law office on Burrard Street, elegant, quiet, with that particular smell of old money and polished, expensive furniture. Marcus followed James through frosted glass doors into a room where two lawyers waited with stacks of documents. Mr. Wellington, the older lawyer, a man named Peter Thornton, greeted with a firm handshake. And this is Marcus Chen, my assistant. The lie was becoming easier to tell. They delved into contractual clauses, intellectual property terms, payment schedules. Marcus followed along, taking notes, but he began to feel the weight of the last few hours. His body was taking its toll. A slight tingling began to spread through his arms. The light seemed too bright, and an old, familiar desire began to whisper in his mind. Just one dose, just to take advantage. You accomplished a lot today. You deserve a little relief. Marcus, James's voice brought him back. The patent documents? Marcus blinked, realizing everyone was staring at him. He had frozen, the folder open in his hands, but couldn't remember what he was looking for. Sweat began to form on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Excuse me, He flipped through the pages and finally found the correct section. Here. James took the documents, but Marcus saw concern in his eyes. The meeting continued, but now Marcus was struggling. Each minute felt like an eternity. His hands began to tremble again. When they took a break, the lawyers went out to make copies. James pulled Marcus into the hallway. Are you well? No. There was no point in lying. It's starting. The withdrawal. I don't know how long I can hold out. James looked out the window at the illuminated city below. There's a detox clinic 2 blocks from here. Vancouver Detox Services. I could... No. Marcus was surprised by the vehemence of his own voice. Not now. I promised 24 hours. How many more are left? James checked. 5:32 p.m. So I still have 17 hours and 32 minutes. Marcus wiped the sweat from his face. I just need to concentrate. Give me something to do. The busier I am, the less I'll think about it. He is sure. Marcus thought about all the broken promises, all the false starts, all the times he gave up when things got tough. This was his chance, not to prove something to James, but to himself. To prove that beneath all the layers of failure and addiction, there was still a core of who he used to be. I am sure. The lawyers returned, and the meeting continued until 10 p.m. When they finally finished, they signed 3 important contracts, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to James's company. But Marcus barely registered the victory. He was too busy trying not to vomit in the fancy elevator while going down. And the night was only just beginning. James drove Marcus back to the apartment, but not to rest. Next meeting is at 7 a.m., he explained, making strong coffee. But before that, I have preparation work. You can get some sleep, or I'd rather work, Marcus interrupted. Sleeping meant being alone with, and his thoughts were dangerous now. What do you need? They spent the next 4 hours immersed in data. James had to prepare a presentation for investors in London, his final pitch. Marcus discovered that his old technical expertise was returning like muscle memory. He identified weaknesses in the presentation, suggested clearer ways to visualize complex data, and even pointed out a financial projection that was incorrect due to a formula error in a spreadsheet. How did you see that? James asked, impressed. Looking, try again. Continue from there to the screen where Marcus had highlighted the error. I used to do this in my sleep, Marcus said, surprised by his own confidence. Financial modeling was essential to getting investors for my startup. You learn to see the numbers behind the numbers. At 2 a.m., James finally leaned back in his chair. We need to get some sleep. How are you feeling? Marcus was honest. It's like my skin is too tight. There are spiders crawling under it, like every cell in my body is screaming. He forced a weak smile. But I'm still here. This is more than many people could manage. James stood up and went to a cupboard, returning with a blanket and pillow. The sofa is comfortable. I set the alarm for 6 a.m. if you need anything during the night. Thank you. The word seemed inadequate for what Marcus truly felt. For everything, I mean. Not just the work, but for seeing me as a person. James nodded. Get some sleep, Marcus. Tomorrow will be even harder. But Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on the sofa, watching the city lights flicker through the floor-to-ceiling windows, his body at war with itself. Waves of nausea came and went. His muscles ached. His mind played tricks on him. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of the apartment. Around 4 a.m., he got up and walked to the window. Down below, Vancouver slept. But he knew the dark corners, the alleys where people like him huddled together seeking warmth and oblivion. It would be so easy to get out, find relief, end this suffering. His hand was on the doorknob when he heard James's voice. Marcus! He turned around. James was in the doorway of the room wearing only sweatpants, his hair disheveled. I wasn't going out, Marcus lied. Yes, I was. James approached, but didn't try to block the door. And I'd understand if you left. No one would expect you to endure this. I hope so, Marcus said, surprised by the truth in the statement. For the first time in years, I truly expect something from myself. James went to the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of water. When Harry died, I spent months wondering what I could have done differently. What signs did I miss? How did I let this happen? He handed a glass to Marcus. My therapist told me that addiction isn't about moral weakness. It's a disease. But she also told me that recovery isn't about never feeling the urge to use. It's about doing the next right thing even when every part of you is screaming to do the opposite. Marcus drank the water, his hands trembling so much that he spilled some. What if I can't do it? What if tomorrow, in the middle of an important meeting, I just collapse? Then we'll deal with it. James sat down on the sofa. But I'll tell you something I've learned building businesses. Do you know what the most important moment is in any major undertaking? The closing of the deal? No. It's the moment right before giving up, when everything seems impossible and you decide to keep going anyway. James looked directly into Marcus's eyes. That's the moment that defines whether you'll succeed or not. And you've already been through dozens of those moments today. Marcus felt something shifting inside him, not a miraculous cure, but an acceptance. The pain wasn't going to disappear. The longing wasn't simply going to vanish, but he could choose, minute by breath, to be present. 13:20, Marcus said, checking the clock on the wall. There's still time to do this right. James smiled. A genuine smile, not of pity, but of respect. Yes, it's possible. They spent the next hour talking, not about business, but about life. James talked about growing up with the pressure of being the successful son while Harry struggled. Marcus spoke about his parents, about the culture of shame that made it impossible to ask for help, about how Sarah was the only person who truly saw him. She would say she's proud of you today, James said calmly. Anyone with half a brain would say that. When the alarm sounded at 6 a.m., Marcus was exhausted but alert. They had coffee, got ready, and set off for the next battle. The 7 a.m. meeting was with James's technical team, 5 software engineers who immediately bombarded Marcus with technical questions, testing whether he truly understood the product. But here, Marcus shone. He could talk about encryption protocols, network security, system architecture. His brain, finally free from the fog of addiction for enough hours, began to function at maximum capacity. You're a waste as an assistant, one of the engineers, a woman named Priya, commented. With that knowledge, you should be in development. Marcus smiled, but didn't answer. He wasn't here to prove he deserved a technical job. He was here to prove he could finish what he started. The next 2 meetings were with corporate clients, a bank wanting to upgrade its security infrastructure, and a telecommunications company concerned about data protection. Marcus took meticulous notes, asked intelligent questions when appropriate, and watched James negotiate with the grace of someone who had been doing it for years. But during the meeting with the bank, something unexpected happened. One of the executives, a man named Robert Chen, stopped mid-presentation and stared intently at Marcus. "Chen, are you related to Marcus Chen, the founder of CyberShield Solutions?" Marcus's heart stopped. His past was literally sitting in front of him. "It's me," Marcus admitted, his voice strangely calm. "Or it was. CyberShield went bankrupt 6 years ago." Robert blinked, clearly shocked. "I know. I used your solutions when I worked at Scotia Bank. It was revolutionary technology. What happened to you? You simply disappeared." There were 100 ways to lie, to soften the truth. But Marcus was tired of lies. "I lost my wife. I developed a substance abuse problem. I lost everything." He met Robert's eyes directly. "I've spent the last few years on the streets of Vancouver, but today is the first day I'm trying to come back." The silence in the room was deafening. James looked ready to intervene, but Marcus subtly raised his hand. He needed to do this alone. And why should we entrust critical security technology to a company that hires... Robert searched for the words. "Someone who failed spectacularly," Marcus finished. "Because failure taught me more about vulnerability, about system weaknesses, about what happens when things fall apart than any success ever could. Because James's technology isn't just good, it's exceptional. And because if you're looking for perfection in business partners, you'll be looking forever. But if you're looking for people who understand the true cost of security failure, you're looking at one." Robert studied Marcus for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Fair point. And for the record, I'm sorry for your loss. Sarah, was it? I remember meeting her at a conference. She was brilliant. The mention of Sarah's name should have hurt, and it did, but in a different way. A clean pain, not the festering pain Marcus had carried for years." "Yes, it was," Marcus agreed gently. The meeting continued, and to Marcus's surprise, it ended with the bank agreeing to a 6-month pilot program. When they left the building, James was beaming. "You just turned what could have been a disaster into one of the most memorable pitch moments I've ever seen. That honesty, that vulnerability, that's not taught in MBAs." Marcus felt something strange, something he hadn't felt in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Pride. Not the arrogant pride of his successful days, but something deeper. Pride in having chosen the truth when lying would have been easier. "How many hours are left?" he asked. 6 hours and 45 minutes until the final meeting with the London investors." James checked his phone. "And then your $3,000. And the decision on what to do next." But neither of them knew that the final meeting wouldn't just be about business. It would be about confronting the question Marcus had been avoiding for 8 years. Who was he really, when everything else was taken from him? They stopped for lunch at a small Vietnamese restaurant in Chinatown. Marcus devoured pho, the hot broth somewhat calming his churning stomach. His withdrawal was in full force now. He was sweating, trembling, occasionally seeing spots floating in his vision, but there was something else, clarity. "The final meeting," James began, stirring his coffee. "It's with Ellington and Associates, a London investment firm. They have a reputation for being ruthless in their due diligence. If they detect any weakness, any inconsistency, they'll tear the proposal apart until there's nothing left." "What is the size of the investment we are seeking?" 12 million Canadian dollars. James let the number hang in the air. "Me from a promising startup to a major player in the cybersecurity market." Marcus whistled softly. "So, no pressure." "Exactly," James leaned forward. "And Catherine Lee found out something. I got a message from her while you were in the bathroom. She knows you're not my regular assistant. She doesn't know the details yet, but she's asking questions." Marcus's stomach clenched, and not from withdrawal. "Is she going to blow this up at the meeting?" Probably. She benefits from me appearing unstable or desperate, so yes, expect her to bring this up at the most damaging moment possible. Marcus put down the spoon, his hunger suddenly gone. So what do we do? The truth again. James smiled humorlessly. You saw how it worked with Robert Chen. Well-placed vulnerability can be stronger than any corporate armor. But this time, it will be in front of 5 ultra-skeptical investors who are actively looking for reasons not to invest. They spent the next 3 hours in James's office, refining the final presentation. Marcus reviewed every number, every projection, every claim. He made James defend every assumption as if he were a hostile investor. And slowly, the presentation went from good to impervious. "You've lost your calling," James commented, noting Marcus identify a subtle flaw in the market analysis. "You should be a business consultant, maybe in another life," Marcus said. But something about the idea resonated. In another life. Or maybe in this life. Starting over. At 5 p.m. they were ready. James put on his best suit, dark navy blue with a silver-grey tie. Marcus straightened his borrowed clothes, now wrinkled after almost 24 hours of continuous wear. "How are you feeling?" James asked as they prepared to leave. Marcus gave an honest inventory. "It felt like I was being turned inside out. Every nerve ending was on fire. I could vomit or faint at any second." He met James's eyes. But also, I was more alive than I'd been in 8 years. James extended his hand. "Whatever the outcome of this meeting, Marcus, you've already won. You know that, right?" Marcus shook hands but shook his head. "Not yet. There are still 3 hours and 15 minutes to go. Don't count your chickens before they hatch." And as they walked toward what would be the most important meeting of both their lives, neither of them realized that Catherine Lee had already set a trap that would test not only her business skills, but Marcus's very character. The meeting took place at the luxurious Fairmont Hotel Vancouver in a private suite overlooking the harbor. 5 people were waiting, 3 men and 2 women, all wearing suits that cost more than Marcus earned in 6 months at the peak of his career, and Catherine Lee sitting discreetly in a corner with a smile that promised nothing good. James Wellington, the leading man identifying himself as Sir Malcolm Ellington, greeted with a refined British accent. "And this must be your notorious assistant about whom we hear so much, the first arrow." James kept smiling. "Marcus Chen, my personal assistant." "Interesting," Catherine interjected gently, her tablet in hand. "Because according to my information, your regular assistant David Park is in the hospital with appendicitis, and Mr. Chen here, well," she slid the tablet across the table. Marcus saw the screen, a photo of himself taken from a security video, sitting on the sidewalk with his cup of arms. Date: December 14th, yesterday. The silence in the room was absolute. "So," Catherine continued, "you replaced your trained and vetted assistant with a homeless person you met? For how long? Less than 24 hours." All heads turned toward James. Marcus felt the room spin, not from withdrawal, but from the sheer terror of having ruined everything. But James did not hesitate. He stood up calmly, walked to the window and turned to face the room. "Yes," he said simply, "and it was the best hiring decision I ever made." Sir Malcolm frowned. "Mr. Wellington, surely you understand how reckless this seems. It seems unwise to believe that a person's worth is determined by their current situation rather than their fundamental capabilities." James gestured to Marcus. "This man founded CyberShield Solutions, a cybersecurity company that was years ahead of its time. He has a master's degree in computer science from UBC, and in the last 24 hours he identified critical errors that my own team missed, saved a meeting with investors by noticing discrepancies in documentation, and impressed senior engineers with his technical knowledge. After years living on the streets," Catherine pressed, with documented substance abuse. Now it was Marcus's turn to stand up. His legs were trembling, but he kept them steady. "Everything she said is true," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but clear. "I lost everything. I lived on the streets for years. I struggled. I still struggle with addiction. And 24 hours ago, I was sitting on that sidewalk with no expectation that my life would change." He stepped forward, meeting the gaze of each person in the room. "But I'll tell you what I learned on the streets that no MBA ever teaches. I learned to read people in seconds because my survival depended on it. I learned to find value where others see garbage. I learned that systems fail, that backup plans are useless if they aren't tested, and that the only thing that matters in a crisis is whether you keep functioning when everything falls apart." He pointed to the presentation projected on the wall. "These numbers, they're solid because I reviewed them as if my life depended on them, because in a way, it does. This market strategy, it's brilliant because James Wellington doesn't hire based on resumes. He hires based on character. And as for me being a risk," Marcus smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "You're investing in cybersecurity technology. Your entire job is to protect against vulnerabilities. Well, I can tell you exactly how the systems fail because I've lived through that failure. I can show you where the cracks appear because I've fallen through them." Sir Malcolm leaned back, fingers interlaced. "Interesting point. But that doesn't change the fact that you represent a public relations risk. If this were to leak..." "So we control the narrative," James interrupted. "Marcus isn't a liability. He's an asset. A story of redemption, of second chances, of recognizing talent where others see failure. That resonates much more than another startup founded by Harvard kids who never failed at anything." One of the investors, who hadn't spoken until now, finally spoke up. "And you, Mr. Chen, what do you want from this resurrection?" Marcus pondered the question. 24 hours ago, he would have said he wanted to escape, forget, disappear. But now, "I want to remember who I was before I lost everything, and discover who I can be afterward." He looked at James, then back at the investors. "You're not investing in me. You're investing in James and his technology. But if my story makes you question his judgment, then you've missed the point. Good judgment isn't about eliminating all risk. It's about identifying when the risk is worth the reward." Catherine Lee seemed about to say something, but Sir Malcolm raised his hand, silencing her. "Well," he said slowly, a small smile playing on his lips, "that was undoubtedly the most unconventional pitch I've ever witnessed." He glanced at his fellow investors, a quiet conversation unfolding with subtle nods. Then he turned back to James. "Let's review the numbers." And for 2 hours, they dissected every aspect of James's business, while Marcus proved that he wasn't just a redemption story. He was the secret weapon James didn't even know he needed. When Sir Malcolm finally put the pen down on the table, it was 8:47 p.m. Exactly 23 hours and 47 minutes since Marcus had returned that iPhone to the sidewalk. 12 million, Sir Malcolm said, on one condition. James leaned forward. "Which one?" "Mr. Chen hereby accepts a formal position in your company, not as an assistant, as a strategic consultant. Part of the package is funding his complete rehabilitation treatment, with the understanding that he will have all the necessary support for his recovery." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't just a job, it was a future. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Sir," Malcolm smiled, a genuine smile, not a business one, "because my son is in rehab right now, 3rd time, and I've spent years ashamed, hiding it, pretending my family was perfect. To see you have the courage to stand here and own your story, to fight through obvious withdrawal to do the work." He cleared his throat. "It reminded me of who I hope my son will become." James looked at Marcus, the question clear in his eyes. Marcus thought about the last 24 hours, the cold, the pain, the moments when he almost gave up. He thought about Sarah and what she would say if she could see him now, not perfect, not healed, but fighting. "Yes," he said, extending his hand to shake Sir Malcolm's. "Yes." The documents were signed. Champagne was served. Marcus politely declined, drinking water while others celebrated. Catherine Lee left without a word, her ambush having failed spectacularly. When they finally left the hotel, Vancouver glistened beneath the light snow that had begun to fall. James handed Marcus an envelope. $3,000, as promised, but tomorrow we'll discuss your actual salary. Marcus looked at the envelope, then at the man who had bet on him when no one else would have. "Why did you really do that?" he asked. The truth. James looked around the city, at the same streets where he had met Marcus less than a day ago. "Because when my brother died, I swore that if I ever had the chance to make a difference to someone struggling, I wouldn't waste it." He met Marcus's eyes. "You gave me that chance, Marcus, just as I gave you one." They were silent for a moment, two men carrying their own losses, their own guilt, but now also sharing something new. Possibility. 6 months later, Marcus Chen was on stage at a technology conference in Toronto. Haircut, full face, clear eyes, the result of 120 days of successful rehabilitation and another 60 working at James's company. "Transformation doesn't happen in 24 hours, he told the audience of hundreds. But commitment does. I made a choice, minute by minute for 24 hours, and then I did it again the next day, and the next." In the front row, James Wellington smiled. "The question isn't, can you change your life in a day?" Marcus continued. "The question is, can you choose the next right thing right now? Because now is all you ever have." On the screens behind him, a photo appeared. Marcus on the sidewalk, next to Marcus now. Not to glorify the fall, but to honor the rise. Sarah would have been proud. Marcus's journey reminds us that true transformation begins with a single choice. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of overcoming adversity and redemption.